We're discussing Manchester City's fixture versus Tottenham on matchday 2. So, what are your thoughts on this fixture?
I think it's going to be a pretty good game, uh, especially with the new signing of Ndombele for Spurs because he's a very good box-to-box midfielder in a way sort of Conte plays, and I think that they've needed a player like him recently because the most of the midfielders that they have are pretty attacking minded, and also that the defensive midfielders that they've had have either been injury prone or haven't exactly been the best, such as Wanyama. Who do you think has the most attacking output threat?
So, after the first game of the season, I think Sterling is a player who could grab a few goals, and definitely maybe Aguero or Gabriel Jesus. It depends how they want to line up. So, with Tottenham, Kane could be a big influence. However, he doesn't always turn up in big games. What do you feel about a few players missing, such as Leroy Sané, Heung-min Son with his red card last season? How do you feel that will affect the game?
Spurs definitely need a player like Son on their team. He was a big influence on why they were creating a lot of chances and scoring a lot of goals last season. So not having him on the field will definitely have a huge impact, but they have a lot of other creative players such as Ericsson and debatably even Lucas Moura because of his pace and other ways of creativity that he shows on the field. But other than that, Sane is a key player for Manchester City, but last season wasn't exactly the greatest for him, especially with how many options that they have, such as Bernardo Silva, Sterling, Mahrez, De Bruyne, even on the wing sometimes could be very effective. Even Gabriel Jesus played a couple of games as a wide midfielder for Brazil, and he played fairly well. So it all depends on how it all comes down, but I don't think him being on the field will be as important for Manchester City as Son would be for Spurs. Other than that, defensively, who do you think is more solid?
I mean, after last game against Aston Villa, Tottenham seemed very open at times. West Ham didn't really fuss Manchester City at the back, especially with all their big signings. They have a lot of squad depth, and I think that Tottenham could struggle to break down Manchester City's defence. But going back to the discussion before, with all the wingers that Manchester City have and all their attacking players, I really don't think that Sane will be a massive influence because of all these players. But another big discussion point going into the fixture is definitely the issues with Ericsson kind of wanting to leave. He had a few issues, and that's why he only came on in the second half last game for Tottenham, but actually made a major impact and, in my opinion, definitely helped the team last game. So, do you feel like they should start Ericsson even with all the issues that's going on?
Yeah, definitely. He's a key player for them. Deli Ali has not been as good as Ericsson has been in the last seasons, even though he's been playing fairly decent, but he hasn't been doing the greatest. He does have a hamstring injury right now, so it's not a guarantee that he will be able to play. But it is, I think it is pretty important that he starts. And one thing that actually was brought up is that Zinchenko last season, every game that he played for Manchester City, he has won. So 23 games, he has won 23 of them. What do you think that means? Because he started off as an attacking midfielder, shifted out to a left back, and because of that, 23 games, 23 wins. What do you think that means?
Well, if you look at Manchester City's form last season, they didn't drop many points, and I feel like he is in and out of a team that is very strong without him and with him. So I don't feel like one player with this Manchester City squad is really going to make that much of a difference, especially the position that he plays. But I definitely feel like he is a really good star coming through the ranks, and it would be exciting to see him maybe try cement a position against a team like Tottenham.
Yeah, I agree. One question I do have for Manchester City though is the fact that they don't have a legit left back, because although they have Benjamin Mendy, he not only hasn't been playing exactly the greatest, which he hasn't been playing bad, but he hasn't been playing exactly like a an amazing fullback. But the other question is, they've been playing a lot of players there that aren't natural left backs. If you look, they've played Fabian Delph, Zinchenko, like I said, both who are midfielders. And then they've also played Laporte, who has been good there, but also, again, not a left back. He is a center back, and he is a very good one at that, too. So deporting him at left back, where he isn't super attacking minding, especially with his lack of pace, makes me question what they should do in the January transfer window, because there are a lot of good options at left back. Meanwhile, they don't have one. And speaking of that, Danny Rose and Davies have not been exactly the most consistent left back for Spurs over the last few years. What do you think they should do in order to improve their situation over there?
Well, we gotta realize that Tottenham have brought in the signing of Ryan Sessegnon, which I feel like is a very, very good signing. He didn't do the best last season. He has proven that he is a very good young player. He didn't do the best last season for a team that got relegated, Fulham. However, he is injured right now, so he won't be a player that can really impact the game against Manchester City. But I definitely feel like the left back role isn't a massive problem for Manchester City with their squad depth, because they have a lot of players that can come in and just help in that role. However, I do feel like that is a position that Manchester City have to work on in the coming season, but I definitely don't feel like that will be an issue. But with Tottenham playing very poorly in the first half against Aston Villa, and there was many gaps that opened up, and many people saying that Tottenham did get a bit lucky with a few outside of the box goals, and also a little pinball goal that got took a couple of deflections off the defenders that landed easily for Harry Kane. Do you think they're ready to play a team such as Manchester City, or is it too early in the season for Tottenham to really bring like a surprise victory?
Well, it's a little bit difficult because with their main striker being Harry Kane, he is a very good forward. But at the same time, they can't just rely on lucky goals such as outside the box goals or pinball goals. Although outside the box goals are very nice to look at the same time, I don't feel like it proves what kind of scoring capabilities a team can do. Because if a team has to rely on a bunch of shots outside the box, it kind of makes it almost a chance that it goes in, even if they have very good long shot takers. In my opinion, I think that they need a new backup striker because, I mean, Lucas Moura is a good striker, but he doesn't fill the gap that Harry Kane can put out. So I think that it's a little bit too early for them to bring a surprise win because of the lack of attacking output that they had in the Aston Villa game. But at the same time, you never know, because soccer or football is a very surprising game. You never know what's going to happen. And in the end, I will have to say that if they're going to want to win this match, they're going to have to rely more on their ability rather than just luck like they did for Aston Villa. So, in the end, my conclusion for that is they're going to have to step it up, and hopefully, if they do step it up, they can actually execute. Um, but I do have to say, now that they lost their captain as Vincent Company, who do you think should be the main captain for Manchester City?
That's a difficult question because over the years there has been a lot of new players coming in and out, and the squad doesn't have a natural leader like someone like Vincent Company or Fabian Delph, who has a lot of experience. But I guess David Silva is getting older now. He's had a lot more experience than some of these younger players that are coming through the Manchester City. Aguero is a great player. Uh, there's a lot of big players in the team. Um, However, you got to remember there is a lot of players that aren't best with their English language. So we need a strong player who can communicate with the squad and get their message across.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think David Silva would probably be the best option for a captain. I mean, he's been there the longest, I think, out of everyone so far right now. And I mean, if they had still Pablo Zabaleta, I think he would be a good, very good option. But sadly, he's basically done. And apart from that, I think David Silva is the best option. Maybe Sergio Aguero, but at the same time, I feel like Silva is more of a captain. But one question I do have to ask is now that Manchester City is debatably at least the squad with the most depth, I would say, for each position. Do you think that there are any youngsters that can actually break through this year, such as Foden did last season, or do you think they're gonna have to become more like Jadon Sancho and have to transfer away to really secure their spot?
I saw a stat at the end of the season, and it said that Manchester City was one of the teams that played maybe the least youngsters or something, and didn't give enough youngsters a chance. I think Foden and Zinchenko, I can't say his name, are very good, talented youngsters that I'm excited to see. However, there's not many youngsters that really get a chance under Pep Guardiola, and I think with a team that can manage to beat teams in the Champions League and in the FA Cup by 6 or 7 goals, I think that they need to start maybe throwing in a few youngsters and trying to develop that youth academy. Manchester City are not known for having one of the best youth academies in England, but I feel like with the squad depth and the team that they have right now, they should really work on the young players coming through, especially with the news like David Silva leaving at the end of the season and players coming in and out. I definitely feel like they should work on their youngsters so they can have more success in the future.
Yeah, I agree with that. The one thing I also have been thinking about is that Spurs don't exactly have the most solid squad, but they have really good chemistry, as it seems. Because you look at their team, and they have a lot of outstanding players, but a lot of them also aren't exactly, how do I put it? I guess in a way consistent. If you look at someone like Lucas Moura, he was pretty good last season, but he had a bunch of spells where he was on and off, and it just didn't seem like he could really secure his spot as a dangerous forward. And I just think that they need to get players that really can solidify themselves as someone that is very good. You also look at a player such as Alderweireld, who is also having problems with the club, and he was not always being put into the starting lineup, and he was having problems with the manager, and he kind of wanted to move during the summer, but he sadly didn't get the move for him. And my real question is, if they can't get a player who is consistent, who do you think will have to step up for Spurs the most this season?
Harry Kane is a player that I feel relies on the players around him to score goals. He is a very, very good finisher. However, he's not the sort of player to dribble other players off the ball and run in from the back. I feel like he needs a very good ball or someone to tee him up. That's why he works very well with Ericsson, but he can't work alone. I feel like if they lost Ericsson, then someone like Dele Alli or Ndombele really have to try and turn up and try and give Harry Kane some good balls. I think it's a big season for players like Lucas and Lamella to finally prove themselves in the Premier League. Um, but my final question is, do you feel like Tottenham did enough in the transfer window? With a rocky end to the season, we wasn't sure who was going to make top four. Arsenal Tottenham, Chelsea, Man United. At one stage, it could have been anyone with their poor results. So, do you think a signing of Ndombele and the signing of Sessegnon and a couple of youngsters is really enough for them to push for the top four, or maybe even title with teams like Manchester United and Arsenal really spending a lot of money to develop their squads?
No, I don't think. I don't think they've done enough, because although they've signed a very talented youngster such as Sessegnon, who has made a lot of appearances for a player of his age and performed at a very good level in those appearances, mainly in the championship. And with a player such as Ndombele, who really proved himself last season as a great box-to-box midfielder, I don't think that they have enough depth within their squad. Because if you look at especially last season, they had to play wingers at striker, if not Lorente or Llorente, however you want to pronounce him, and he did not do very well. And it's a shame because you lose someone as such with such importance, such as Harry Kane. They really start to crumble almost. And at the same time, it goes for almost every position. Because you look at the center backs, if you lose Young Vertonghen or one of the three center backs, you have one replacement as the bench, but then you also have to use some sort of youngster that isn't exactly well known because they don't use a lot of youngsters on their squad. So, in my opinion, they did very good signing those players, but at the same time, I don't think they've done enough to really give a lot of how do I say it? They don't give a lot of depth because once they start to lose a key player, they don't have another player who might not be as good, but isn't, how do I say it? They they can't consistently be all right, if that makes sense. Because in another way to put it, I guess, if you lose Harry Kane, you almost lose your entire attacking output. Because in a sense, you go from someone that's scoring 20 to 30 goals a season to someone like Llorente, who again doesn't play a lot, but only scored like 3 or 4 goals within a pretty solid amount of appearances. So I guess for my last question to you is, now that Manchester City have been deploying a bunch of players almost out of position with central midfielders going out wide and even to defense, and defenders who are not really meant to play outside going outside defense, whatever you want to call it. What do you think Manchester City are trying to show to the world about playing players that are, I guess, playing in positions that shouldn't be doing well for them, such as Fabian Delph and Zinchenko at left back, and how they are actually doing well?
I think the thing with Manchester City is they have so much quality in their team that they can afford to throw in a couple players out of position. And honestly, I feel like they may have got a bit lucky. Maybe Pep Guardiola has put in extra time and practice to develop players like Delph into a left back, who has recently moved to Everton and will probably play as a midfielder. But I feel like when you have that much quality and you have a few positions that you have to fill in, you can honestly just develop these players and work hard to maybe develop them. And maybe they won't be someone like Fabian Delph, maybe he won't be so defensive minded, but he will have a role that will suit his style of play. So maybe his clearances or just finding a counter attacking ball. But I think with the quality that Manchester City have, Pep Guardiola is able to make these sacrifices and is able to risk a lot. But it's working for him, so good on him.
My last question kind of relates to that one. Do you think other teams in the world, such as, I guess, not just in the Premier League, but any top team in the world, do you think that they should start implementing players in other positions that they're not supposed to be necessarily used to try to fill a position that they might be sacrificing or, I guess, lacking? an example would be Sergi Roberto moving to right back for Barcelona, who is originally a midfielder. Do you think more teams should be trying to make more sacrifices like that in order to take a chance of actually succeeding?
Well, it depends on their financial position, and it depends on their place in the season. So many teams who like to play players out of position, such as like Crystal Palace with Wan-Bissaka, they make these sacrifices because they have no other option. They have limited players in that position, and they have to fill that position or change up the tactics. Sometimes these managers feel like they can see potential in players playing that position, and I wouldn't suggest you put them in that position first time in a Champions League final. But I'm saying that if they have the quality and they have the ability to play in that position, then try them out in like a smaller game that they're more confident for. Then throw them in a big game unless they don't have enough numbers and they really have to fill that position. But I wouldn't say that's smart to play a player out of position if they lack the ability to play there, because they might be a class player, but if they don't fit that position, then maybe they have to work on bringing in a player to replace that position in the future. Whether they have a quality player who's just out injured, they might have to find a replacement for them. So to finish off this video, what is your score predictions?
Um, Especially my score prediction for this really revolves around Son not being played because I think that he's a very key influence, and especially with the match last game. I mean, you look at Aston Villa scoring a goal pretty early on, and they don't have exactly the most deadly strike force in the world. So because of the leaky defense that happened, if they don't improve it, if it stays the same from that game, I'm gonna have to say 4-0, maybe 4-1, but 4-0 to Manchester City. What about you?
Um, I feel like Tottenham are going to implement a defensive system where they will sit back and they will try and hit Manchester City on the counter. I definitely do feel like Manchester City will win this one, but I feel like they will defend so deep that they will struggle to get their goals. So I feel like maybe 2-0 Manchester City. Um, and if Tottenham push forward a bit, maybe it might go 3-1. But honestly depends on Pep Guardiola's tactics, and I guess I'm gonna say maybe 3-1 if that happens. So yeah,
I think that's a pretty good answer. Pretty close to mine.
thank you for watching. We'll have a new video coming out soon.